catalogs can be overwhelming. And it's the middle of winter and catalog time of year. So this is the third in my little series for completely beginner gardeners, how to get started from scratch with no experience. And these are coming in the mail, right? Full of all of these gratuitously beautiful pictures of food awesomeness and flower awesomeness, right? And it makes you want to grow everything. But when you're first starting out, don't try to grow everything. Okay? First off, scale your gardens to what you can manage, what you can till during the planting season. This is always a big thing. How much ground can you actually manage in the 1 or 2 weeks of your prime planting season, right? You can stretch it a little bit, but you have to be able to get the work done in order to set these out. And less done well is better. Remember, better, not perfect. Less done well is better than more done poorly. Okay? So first think about how much ground can you actually till, and then how much can you actually plant in that, right? So we're narrowing it down from everything to just a few things really quick just with that. Third question, what do you like to eat? What do you like to eat? What do you enjoy? And fourth question, what grows well in your area? What grows well in your area? So you might like to eat bananas, but if you live in New York State like I do, that's not a great thing to be putting in your garden. If you're watching this from Hawaii, grow bananas. They're super easy. Put them in your lo'i. It's great, right? But if you're up here, not so much, right? Not so much. Pick things that are really good for your area. So what you want to do is close these catalogs. Sit with your family, sit with your spouse, sit with your partner, and think about what you actually want to grow. Okay? What would you most enjoy? And for your first garden, you're not going to be putting up tonnage of stored food for your winter after your first garden. First gardens are always rough, okay? Even if you're an expert gardener, first year breaking sod in a new area is always going to be a rough garden. It's just part of the nature of it. So think about what you would enjoy. Would you enjoy having some fresh sugar peas for your stir fry that you can go out and pick? Would you enjoy having something to snack on while you're out in the garden? Would you enjoy having fresh tomatoes for your pizza? Right? Think about that. What would you enjoy? Okay? And then from that list of things, go to, not to a big box store garden center, but go to a mom and pop garden center or go to a farmer's market that has plant sellers. And talk to the people selling those seedlings. So they're going to be local to you. What is easy in your soils and what is more difficult in your soils? Buy a couple of plants from them, but if they're tomato sellers, maybe buy a couple of tomatoes, but you can still pick their brain about snap peas, right? And ask them what grows well. And from a list of half a dozen or 10 things that you would enjoy in your garden, narrow it down to the things that you enjoy and grow really well. And that still doesn't narrow it down enough. Think about things that are kind of expensive at the store, and even growing a small amount of them would be productive, right? So you could think about something like a pizza garden, right? With some tomatoes and some basil. You could throw a little parsley in there. And you have high value things that don't take up a whole lot of space, right? Versus growing potatoes where you need expansive garden to have enough to really be worth the effort. Okay? So think about just a handful of things, 4, maybe 5, that are going to go into your first garden. Okay? Then it comes to varieties. For your first garden, don't overthink seed saving, don't overthink heirlooms, don't overthink any of that. Just get something in the ground that grows well. This is, again, we're talking to somebody at a farmer's market, an experienced gardening neighbor, or a mom and pop greenhouse can be really helpful. What varieties does it grow without having to think about it? Okay. So To add a little bit to this, there's kind of three big buckets of plants that you're going to encounter. The middle bucket is the heavy feeders. These are the guys that need a lot of fertilizer, that need a lot of nitrogen, that need a lot of, in particular, phosphate for a lot of, like, I'm looking at you, tomatoes, right? Need a lot of phosphate, need fair nitrogen. Peppers, potatoes, eggplant, corn. These are all heavy feeders. These are all heavy feeders. So you want to maybe not focus on them as much in your first garden. The light feeders, what we would call in botany ruderal vegetation, the stuff where the ancestors of the domestic plants grow out of cracks in concrete in their native habitat, right? Those you can get away with murder on. Lettuce, right? Lettuce is just a domesticated thistle, literally. You can get away with a lot on lettuce and still have great lettuce. I just plant leaf lettuce like it's grass seed, and even in the lousiest soil you'll ever encounter, it will do well. If you live in a really hot area, it will bolt quickly. But if you live in a cooler area, it will do extremely well, even in lousy soil, right? Things like turnips and beets aren't that picky. They're not heavy feeders. So if you're looking at 6 or 8 and you want to narrow it down to 4 or 5, lean toward the ones that aren't heavy feeders. Okay? Also, and this is again where conversations with people at farmers markets and your neighbors can come in handy, soil pH. If you live in an acidic soil area, you're going to have an easier time with tomatoes, but a harder time with peppers and pickles and some of those things. So, not that you can't grow them, but you're going to need to really lime the soil for those if you live in an acidic soil area. And then you won't grow your tomatoes as well. So some of these things that need radically different soils, pick the ones that are going to grow easiest with the least amount of work right where you are. I can't answer that question for you because, again, this is YouTube. This is a worldwide platform. But your neighbors can. Your gardening neighbors can. That mom and pop store can. Okay? So that's the third thing to think about. And then the last thing to think about is again, I mentioned things that need a large area to really have enough to be worth the effort to put them in. Onions are kind of in this category. Green onions not. You can just plant your onion sets really, really close together and get nice scallions. But to have a lot of large onions, they need to be spaced fairly far apart, and you only get one onion. So they need a little bit more space. Maybe not for your first garden. Maybe once you have 2 or 3 gardens built, now you can come to that. Potatoes are like that. Your corn, you need at least 100 stalks of corn close together to get good pollination on sweet corn. So if you're just doing one 10 by 10 patch, probably corn is not the wisest one to go with. Again, later on, build a little more garden. You've learned, you've adapted, you've prepared soil. Go for the corn. Okay? But for your first, I'm just experimenting with something completely new. Stay away from those. Herbs are great. So many of the herbs that we grow are these ruderal plants, the things that come up out of the cracks in concrete in their native habitat, right? Very easy to grow in a large number of different soils. Some of the others I've already mentioned. Peas are fairly easy to get along with. Beans are fairly easy to get along with. Squash are fairly easy to get along with. Plant a zucchini. Right? One zucchini plant will keep your family happy for zucchini, I promise. Okay? You can have a zucchini apocalypse very, very quickly. So those sort of squashes, the summer squash, are a very good thing. Bushing, bush form summer squash like your zucchini. Again, if you want a pumpkin patch, great. Probably not for your first garden because they need to expand and have some room to sprawl out. So think about those things. There's some sort of heuristics to kind of narrow down everything that's possible down to a few things that are great. And if you're doing this in a small yard, I would recommend throwing some flowers in there. throw some against the back of your garden, throw some sunflowers in. Against the front of your garden, throw some marigolds in. You'll pull in some pollinators. You'll have some other, you can have some other, function stacking in there. But again, don't worry too much about that right at the beginning. Just make it pretty. Enjoy it. You want to enjoy this first experience. So tucking some annuals around the edges to pretty it up, show it off to your neighbors. It'll help you enjoy it more. That's a good thing to do. And lastly, I do want to mention, again, with picking garden size and how much you want to get into, if you live in an area that has a deer population, you gotta fence it or you're going to get destroyed. Especially if you're in suburbia where there isn't hunting to control the deer. The simplest way to fence deer out is to keep the garden relatively small, 10 by 10 at most. Get 4 pound-in tea stakes. You can get them at any hardware store, and a roll of chicken wire. Pound in the stakes, zip tie the chicken wire to it. You want about 4 foot tall chicken wire. Zip tie the chicken wire to it, and it will keep the deer out. You also now have an instant trellis for beans, peas, or tomatoes. So you can plant those around the edge. That's how we structure our garden. Everything is fenced, and all of the climbers just go around the perimeter, and then we don't have to put in extra stakes for them. So that will help you in more than one way. It won't be a real durable offense, but at the end of the season, snip those zip ties, pull everything down, put it in the shed or in your basement, and you can put it back out next year. Really easy to do. So there's my beginning tips on thinking through scale of planting and what you want to plant. Pick something that your family loves, something that speaks to you culturally, and then talk to people and find out specifically of that set of things that you love, that speak to you culturally, what is going to do best in your area with the least work, and set yourself up for success. So I hope you like this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.